The wind carried dust like a curse through the frontier town of Dry Creek. Stinging eyes filling mouths, settling into every fold of clothing. The street was little more than hard-packed dirt, but today it felt like a stage where lives could turn with a single act. Outside the sheriff's office, a crowd gathered, drawn by rumor and hunger for spectacle. At the center of it all stood a man, shackled, beaten, half-conscious, but unbowed. They called him Savage. Some whispered he was half Lakota. Others claimed he was nothing but a nameless outlaw who'd slit throats in 3 states. His hair fell in black tangles across his bruised face, and his shirt was torn down the back, showing a lattice of whip marks. Yet in his eyes, when they flickered open, burned something too fierce to be extinguished. Pride, pain, defiance. String him up. Someone shouted. The cry was followed by jeers, spittle, and a rock that struck the prisoner's shoulder. The sheriff, a heavy man with a graying beard, made no move to stop the abuse. For the townsfolk, cruelty was entertainment and justice meant blood. It was then she appeared. Miss Eliza Hartwell, newly arrived on the morning coach. Her bonnet shaded her face, but not enough to hide the sharpness in her eyes. She had come west under the strangest of bargains. A mail-order bride arrangement she had agreed to out of desperation, believing marriage might offer safety in a world that had shown her little kindness. Instead, the first thing she saw upon stepping onto Dry Creek Street was a man about to be destroyed before her eyes. Her heart clenched. This wasn't the world she had read about in letters, the one of fresh starts, wide skies, and honest men building lives from the dust. No, this was raw, cruel, and heartless. He killed a rancher's son, someone muttered near her, voice thick with relish. Caught stealing cattle. Half-breed deserves worse than hanging, but Eliza studied the prisoner's face. There was no bloodlust in those eyes, no smugness of a criminal proud of his crime. There was grief there, sorrow buried beneath rage. She had seen it before in her own father's eyes, before drink took him down into ruin, and suddenly she couldn't bear it. Her boots struck hard against the boards of the sheriff's porch as she pushed through the crowd. Whispers followed her, for she was young, fine-featured, too finely dressed to belong here yet. The sheriff frowned as she placed herself between him and the chained man. "Step aside, miss," the sheriff rumbled. "You don't know what kind of devil you're standing in front of." Her hands shook, but her voice did not. "Don't hurt him," she said, every syllable ringing out like the crack of a gunshot. "I'll buy him." The crowd hushed. Laughter bubbled up in disbelief. "Buy him?" The sheriff sneered. "This ain't no auction block. He's bound for the gallows, not your parlor." But Eliza straightened her back. "Then let him serve his sentence under me. Let me take responsibility. Call him Savage if you want, but I see a man worth saving." For the first time, the prisoner's gaze fully met hers. Something flickered there. Confusion, hope, a deep, wary hunger he didn't dare admit. The sheriff spat into the dust. "Woman, you're out of your mind. No one bargains with a killer." "Then bargain with me," she pressed. Her voice trembled now, but she forced it steady. "I came west to build a life. What better way to start than by saving one?" Behind her, the crowd shifted uneasily. Some mocked, others murmured. But more than one face showed a flicker of respect, for it was rare to see courage in a place where cruelty ruled. The sheriff squinted at her, weighing the value of her words against the hunger of the mob. "And if he kills you?" he asked coldly. "Then that'll be on me," Eliza whispered. "But I won't stand by and watch another man broken when he might yet be healed." The silence that followed felt heavy as the prairie sky before a storm. Deeper. Background Eliza's choice was not born of naivety, though the crowd believed so. She had lived her life in shadows of men who mistook power for cruelty. Her father had squandered the family's fortune, leaving her with nothing but shame. Her uncle had pressed her toward a marriage of convenience back east, one she had fled. The West was supposed to be different, supposed to be raw but honest, cruel yet fair, and here she was, discovering it might be worse. Still, she could not shake the certainty that the man they called Savage was not the monster they painted him to be. There was a story behind those chains, a reason behind his silence. For him, the moment burned differently. He had spent weeks hunted, beaten, dragged across miles, accused of crimes he had not committed, or not in the way they said. The cattle weren't his theft. He had taken food for his starving kin, after drought stripped their land. But words never mattered to men who wanted vengeance more than truth. When he heard the woman's voice, clear, fierce, unwilling to bow, something cracked open inside him. He had expected death. He had even welcomed it. What he had not expected was mercy. And so the bargain began. though no one yet knew how costly it would be. Eliza Hartwell, the runaway bride who dared to stand against a mob, the man called Savage whose true name still waited like a buried flame, and the town of Dry Creek, where whispers of their fate would spread like wildfire. In that moment, under the punishing sun, destiny shifted. For love, survival, justice, and redemption often begin not in quiet, gentle moments, but in defiance shouted before the hangman's noose. The air in Dry Creek seemed to shiver after Eliza's words, as though the desert itself had drawn in a long breath. People shifted uneasily, muttering among themselves. The idea of a woman standing in front of a mob to protect a shackled man was unheard of in this place where the strong preyed on the weak and mercy was a forgotten virtue. The Sheriff Duncan, had lived long enough on the frontier to know how quickly a crowd's temper could turn. He rubbed his jaw, scowling, calculating not just the law but the politics of the moment. The townsfolk wanted blood, but they also wanted spectacle, and here was a spectacle no one had planned for. A well-dressed Eastern lady defying him in the middle of Main Street. "You got no say here, miss," Duncan finally said, his voice heavy. "Justice is justice. He hangs tomorrow at dawn." Eliza did not step back. If anything, she seemed to root herself deeper, like a young oak refusing to bend in the storm. "Then if justice is justice," she said firmly, "let him be judged by more than rumor. Let me hear the charges, the evidence, the truth. Or else this isn't justice, it's murder dressed up for the crowd." Her words stirred the silence like a stone dropped into water. Some townsfolk frowned, muttering that she was right. Others spat in the dust, angry that she would meddle. The prisoner, still bound, still silent, lifted his head at last. For the first time since his capture, he spoke. His voice was hoarse, rough, but it carried. "They don't want truth," he said, eyes locked on the sheriff. "They want to bury what they don't understand." Eliza turned sharply, startled to hear his voice. There was strength in it, raw and untamed, and though his words cut like flint, they held no malice toward her. The sheriff barked a laugh. "Listen to him. Half-breed outlaw talking like he knows better than the law. This woman's been here not an hour and she thinks she can undo frontier justice? No, Miss Hartwell. Tomorrow he hangs." The name startled Eliza. How did he know her name? Then she realized. The mail coach had brought only one passenger that morning. Word traveled fast in towns this small. She felt her cheeks flush, but she refused to retreat. "Then I'll pay his bail," she pressed. "If you must keep him under sentence, keep him under me. I'll watch him, work him, see that he does no harm. But I will not let you kill him while the truth's been silenced." Gasps broke from the crowd. Whispers flew like startled crows. Some men jeered, but others studied her with new respect. The sheriff spat again, clearly unsettled. "You're a stubborn fool, woman. You think a soft Eastern lady can control a killer like him?" He gestured roughly to the prisoner. "You think he won't slit your throat the first night you close your eyes?" Before Eliza could answer, the prisoner spoke again, his gaze steady on the sheriff. "If I wanted her dead," he said evenly, "she'd already be on the ground." A chill swept the crowd. The words were blunt, but his tone wasn't boastful. It was matter-of-fact, undeniable. And in that moment, something dangerous and fragile passed between Eliza and the man they called Savage. A spark, perhaps trust, perhaps doom. The weight of choice. That evening, long after the crowd had dispersed in a storm of mutters and rumors, Eliza sat in the sheriff's office while Duncan pored over papers. He had agreed begrudgingly to let her take responsibility, but only after she swore before two witnesses and paid a bond most of her savings would never cover. "You're mad," he said flatly as he handed her the papers. "No decent woman ties herself to scum like him. Mark my words, you'll regret this." Eliza signed her name with steady hand, though her heart thundered. "I've regretted far more in my life by staying silent when I should have spoken," she murmured. "This I won't regret." In the corner, chained still to the wall, the prisoner watched her. His eyes, dark and unreadable, gave nothing away. Yet when she passed near him, she felt his gaze on her like heat, like a brand. "What's your name?" she asked softly. For a moment he said nothing. Then low, as though the word itself had been buried under too much dust and pain, he answered. "Calder," the sheriff snorted. "Don't bother with his name. He'll always be Savage in this town." But Eliza ignored him. She repeated it under her breath as though to anchor it in her memory. Calder. The first night when darkness fell, Calder was released into her custody. Iron cuffs still bound his wrists, though the sheriff grudgingly handed her a key. "You'll need it," he muttered, "or you'll be dead by morning." Together they walked through Dry Creek, the townsfolk peering from doorways and windows. Whispers followed them, sharper than knives. "Look at her, dragging a wolf into her home. She'll be his first meal. Mark it, she won't last a week." Eliza held her head high, though each word stung. She had rented a small cabin at the edge of town, its roof sagging, its walls thin. When she opened the door and lit a lamp, the space felt almost too intimate for two strangers bound by such dangerous circumstance. Calder stood in the doorway, shoulders nearly brushing the frame. His presence filled the cabin like a storm. She set the lamp on the table, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "I don't know if I've saved you or doomed us both," she admitted. "But I couldn't watch them kill you." For the first time his expression shifted. Not quite a smile, but something softer in his eyes. Something like gratitude, worn and cautious. "People don't save men like me," he said quietly. "Not unless they want something." Eliza drew a breath. "Then perhaps I'm not like other people." Silence stretched between them, thick with all that was unsaid. Fear, hope, mistrust, possibility. Outside, coyotes howled across the barren hills, and inside that cabin, two fates entwined beneath the weight of choices neither could yet understand. The cabin walls creaked with every gust of wind that swept down from the hills, as though the house itself was warning them both. Eliza placed the key to Calder's shackles on the rough wooden table, the iron clinking against the lamp base. Her fingers lingered there, trembling slightly, though she tried to still them. "You can free yourself," she said softly, her voice low as if afraid the night outside might overhear. Calder's gaze followed the key, then lifted back to her face. His eyes were like coals, banked but glowing with something she couldn't name. He did not reach for the key immediately. Instead, he studied her, as though weighing whether her act was born of courage or desperation. "You're braver than the lot of them," he said at last, his tone slow, almost grudging. "But braver doesn't always mean wiser." Eliza forced a small, sharp smile. "Perhaps I've had enough of being wise." When she finally slid the key across the table, he reached for it. The chains fell away from his wrists with a metallic sigh. He rubbed the raw skin beneath, his movements controlled, almost ceremonial. For the first time since she had seen him, he looked like a man unbound, not just in body but in spirit. Yet the freedom did not put her at ease. Instead, it filled the cabin with a new tension. She had handed him the means to overpower her, to disappear into the night, to undo everything she had risked. He seemed to sense her unease. "If you're thinking I'll kill you," he murmured, voice low but clear, "I'll tell you plain, you're the first soul in a long while who's looked at me without spitting. That's worth more than you think." His words struck her like a confession, honest and unexpected. But before she could answer, he crossed to the window. He pushed aside the curtain and peered into the darkness beyond. "They'll come," he said grimly. "Who?" she asked, startled. "Men who'd rather see me dead than free. Ranchers, deputies, bounty folk sniffing for coin. You think buying me made me safe? No. It just painted a bigger target on your back." Eliza swallowed hard, her throat dry. She had imagined gossip, perhaps cold shoulders from the townsfolk, but not the thought of men coming in the night to finish what the law had failed to do. "Then why didn't you leave?" she whispered. "You could have taken that key and vanished into the dark." He turned, his face shadowed, unreadable. "Because running don't end it. I've been running half my life, truth is. I don't even know what it means to stop." His words carried a weariness that unsettled her more than his strength. He was a man driven by ghosts, chained to something deeper than iron, Eliza's reflection. When Calder finally settled by the door, keeping watch as though expecting raiders any moment, Eliza lay awake on the narrow bed. Sleep would not come. Her mind spun in circles, replaying the day's events. The mob, the sheriff's threats, Calder's steady, haunted eyes. What had she done? She had come west with hope of building a life, of finding stability, perhaps even love. Instead, she had bound herself to a man the town called savage, and yet something in her heart whispered she had done right. She remembered the way his voice had changed when he spoke to her. Hard still, but with a flicker of something almost gentle, something almost human. She clung to that glimmer, though fear gnawed at her. For she knew this land was not kind to women alone, let alone women tied to outlaws. She would need every ounce of courage to survive what was coming. Calder's vigil be the dim lamplight. Calder sat in silence. His back rested against the door, his rifle balanced across his knees, his eyes fixed on the shadows outside. Every sound reached him, the scrape of branches against the roof, the distant yelp of coyotes, the shifting of the earth as the desert cooled. His thoughts were not of escape, though freedom lay only a breath away. Instead, they circled the woman who now held his fate. He could not fathom why she had risked herself for him. He had seen women in towns look away, spit, curse him. Never once had one stood between him and death. Her courage stirred something he had long thought dead, a memory of trust, of kinship, of what it meant to believe someone might see more than scars and blood. But he pushed the thought aside. Kindness was a luxury men like him could not afford. And yet, as the night deepened, he found himself whispering her name under his breath, as though it might anchor him to this fragile moment. Eliza. The warning just before dawn. He heard it, the soft crunch of boots outside, too careful to be casual. He stiffened, every sense alive. "Get up," he hissed, startling Eliza awake. She sat up, eyes wide. "What is it?" "Trouble." He blew out the lamp, plunging the cabin into gray pre-dawn light. Shadows moved outside, 3, maybe 4 men. He caught the glint of rifles. They had come faster than he expected. Men who carried grudges or men who carried coin, it didn't matter. They had come for blood. Eliza's breath caught, her heart racing. "What do we do?" Calder's mouth curved into something between a grimace and a smile. "We survive." The pale rim of dawn had barely kissed the horizon when the first shot cracked through the stillness. It was not a warning shot, it was meant to kill. The bullet tore through the cabin shutter, splintering wood in an explosion of dust and light. Eliza gasped, clutching her nightdress close as her heart thundered. Calder was already moving, pushing her down to the floorboards with one swift, firm hand. His body shielded hers, his breath hot against her ear. "Stay low," he muttered, his voice a rasp of urgency. "Don't move unless I tell you." The second shot followed, this one closer, thudding into the door where Calder had sat vigil hours before. Outside, bootsteps shuffled, a man cursed, and another barked a sharp order. They were circling, hunting. Eliza's fear threatened to swallow her whole. She had lived through shouting, through fists, through nights when her father's rage had broken furniture and bones alike. But this was different. This was war pressed against her very doorstep. "How many?" she whispered. 4, maybe 5, Calder said grimly, crouched at the window, peering through a crack. "Too many for comfort. Not enough to scare me." The calmness in his voice unsettled her almost as much as the bullets. He was not a man new to violence, he was carved by it, shaped into something dangerous. Yet there was no cruelty in his eyes now, only fierce calculation. Another shot struck, and this one sent the lamp shattering. Shards of glass glittered on the floor. The smell of kerosene thick in the air. Eliza coughed, her throat raw, but forced herself to stay still. "What do they want?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Me," Calder said flatly. "Dead or alive, they don't much care which. Could be ranch hands looking for revenge, could be bounty hunters sniffing for coin. Either way, they won't stop." Eliza pressed a hand to her chest, trying to steady her racing heart. "And me?" His jaw tightened. "You're collateral. Or worse." The unspoken hung between them like smoke. If the men got inside, her fate would be sealed in ways she dared not imagine. The siege, the men outside began shouting, voices thick with drink and hate. "Send him out, girl. No reason you gotta die for him. We'll give you one chance, step aside and we'll make it quick. Or maybe we'll take our time." Laughter followed, sharp and ugly. Eliza felt her stomach twist. But Calder rose to his full height, his shadow cutting against the thin morning light. He moved with a calmness that was almost terrifying, loading his rifle with steady hands. When he spoke, his voice rolled low and certain. "They won't touch you." Eliza wanted to believe him. God help her, she wanted to. The first man came too close, bootsteps crunching against the porch boards. Calder waited, patient as a predator. When the doorframe darkened with the shape of a rifle barrel, he fired. The blast rocked the cabin and the man outside cried out, stumbling back into the dust. "One less," Calder muttered. Anger exploded outside. 2 more men returned fire, bullets rattling against the walls, punching holes through the thin boards. The cabin shook as if it might collapse. Eliza pressed herself against the floor, covering her ears, tears streaming unbidden down her cheeks. Still, Calder did not waver. He reloaded, ducked, and returned fire with deadly precision. Eliza's breaking point at last. Silence fell. Only the crackle of burning kerosene on the shattered lamp filled the room. Eliza lifted her head, trembling. "Are they gone?" she whispered. "Not yet," Calder answered, eyes never leaving the window. "They'll regroup. Maybe try the roof, maybe wait for nightfall." He turned to her then, his face smeared with soot, his eyes burning. "We don't have long," her voice broke. I can't live like this. I thought I was saving you. But I've chained myself to a death sentence. Maybe they're right, maybe I should have let you hang." Her words sliced through the room. Calder froze, his chest heaving once. Then slowly he lowered his rifle. "You think I asked for this?" he said, his voice rough, ragged. "You think I wanted some Eastern lady to throw herself into my grave with me? No, but you stood up. You chose. And now you don't get to take it back when it gets hard." Eliza's tears burned hot, but beneath the fury in his words she heard something else. Desperation. Almost a plea. "Why?" she asked, choked. "Why are they so eager to kill you? What did you do?" He met her gaze, unflinching. "I stole cattle," she blinked, stunned. "For money?" "For food," he said simply. "My kin were starving. Winter near took us. I did what I had to. Ranchers call it theft. I call it survival. But in this land, survival don't mean much when the ones in power own the law." The truth struck her harder than any bullet. He was not innocent, not completely. But neither was he the monster they painted. For a long moment they only stared at one another, the cabin silent except for their breaths. The Vowcalder picked up his rifle again, his movements sharp, decisive. "They'll come again. Maybe tonight, maybe sooner. But I'll tell you this plain, Eliza. I'll kill every one of them before I let them lay a hand on you." Something inside her shifted. Fear still churned in her belly, but alongside it grew something else, a fragile, dangerous trust. She rose shakily to her feet, wiped her tears with the back of her hand, and crossed the room to stand beside him. "Then we survive," she said quietly. "Together." His jaw clenched, his eyes locked on hers, and in that moment, the bond between them hardened like steel, forged in fire and blood. The day stretched long and heavy, the sun climbing until it baked the little cabin beneath its glare. Hours passed in uneasy silence, punctuated by distant movement. Boots crunching on gravel, the low murmur of men keeping watch, the occasional whinny of a horse. The attackers had not left. They lingered like wolves at the edge of a campfire, patient and hungry. Inside, the air grew stifling. Eliza sat at the rough-hewn table, hands folded tightly in her lap, while Calder stood sentinel by the door. Every so often he shifted, his rifle ready, his gaze sharp. The muscles in his jaw flexed with tension. "They're waiting us out," he said at last, his voice breaking the silence. "They know a man trapped long enough will break. Hunger, thirst, fear, it makes fools of anyone." "And you?" she asked quietly. "Will it make a fool of you?" He looked at her then, eyes steady, unblinking. "I've been hunted before. I know how to outlast men who only want blood, but—" He hesitated, his gaze flicking over her, lingering just long enough for her breath to catch. "You're no outlaw. You ain't built for sieges." His words stung, though she knew he did not mean them as cruelty. She lifted her chin. "I may not be built for it, but I will endure it. I didn't come all this way to fall apart." For a moment, a ghost of something like respect flickered across his face. Whispers of betrayal by late afternoon. Voices carried clearer through the heat. The men outside had grown bolder, louder, their taunts sharp as arrows. "Woman, you still alive in there? Send him out and we'll spare you. Don't be a fool, he ain't worth your life. Town don't care about you, girl. They'll thank us when it's done." Eliza's stomach churned. She had expected cruelty, but she had not expected the townsfolk to abandon her so quickly. When she had stood in the square that morning, some had looked at her with admiration. Now, hours later, none had come to her aid. Calder heard it too, and his mouth curved into something hard and bitter. "They'll sell you out, Eliza. Towns like this, they turn quicker than the wind. Don't put faith in people who cheer for blood." But even as he spoke, hoofbeats sounded on the road. A lone rider approached, dust rising in the golden light. Eliza's breath caught as she recognized the shape of Sheriff Duncan. "He's come to help," she whispered, almost to herself. Calder's expression hardened, or to finish it. The sheriff dismounted outside, his boots heavy on the porch. "Eliza Hartwell," he called, his voice booming. "You open this door now or you'll hang beside him for harboring a criminal." Her pulse raced. She rose to her feet, torn between hope and dread. "Don't," Calder said sharply, his hand tightening on her arm. "You trust him, you're dead." He's the law, she shot back, her voice trembling. Law ain't the same as justice. The stand, she turned to the door, her hands trembling but her voice clear. Sheriff Duncan, she called. This man is under my charge. You signed the papers yourself. I won't betray my word. The silence that followed felt endless. Then the sheriff laughed, low and cold. You're a fool, girl. The law can be bought and I've already been paid. Calder's grip tightened on his rifle, his teeth bared in a snarl. I told you, he muttered. The sheriff's voice hardened. Last chance. Open up or we burn you out. Eliza's breath caught. Fire. She could almost see the flames licking at the walls already, smell the smoke. But Calder stepped forward, his shadow falling across her. They'll try, he said, his voice like steel. But this cabin ain't fallen easy, and neither are we. A fragile bond as the sheriff retreated to join the others. The air in the cabin grew thick with silence. Eliza sat heavily, her body shaking, her mind torn between terror and a strange, wild exhilaration. She had defied the law, defied the mob, defied her own fear. Calder crouched beside her, his voice low now, almost gentle. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, she whispered. Because if I gave you up now, then everything I did yesterday, everything I risked, it would all mean nothing. Their eyes met in the dim light, and something unspoken passed between them. Not love, not yet, but the seed of something dangerous and undeniable. He reached out then, rough fingers brushing her hand only for a moment before pulling away. Outside, voices rose again, preparing, plotting. Inside, two hearts beat against the odds, bound now not by chains but by choice. Night fell like a black shroud across Dry Creek, and with it came the glow of torches. Shadows flickered on the cabin walls, orange tongues of fire licking at the darkness as the mob gathered. Their voices rose in cruel harmony, shouts, jeers, the clatter of rifles being loaded. They had waited all day, but patience was over. Now they wanted blood and ash. Inside, the air was thick, suffocating. Eliza stood at the window, watching the glow creep closer, her hands twisting in her skirts. Fear roared through her veins, yet beneath it ran something steadier, something fierce. She had chosen this. Chosen him. And if this was to be her end, then she would face it with her head high. Calder moved with sharp, deliberate purpose. He poured water into buckets, scattered what little food and supplies they had into a pile ready to be carried if they somehow escaped. His rifle leaned within arm's reach. His face was hard, carved in lines of determination, yet his eyes kept darting to her, as though making certain she hadn't broken beneath the weight of what loomed outside. They mean to burn us out, he said at last, his voice steady but grim. I know, Eliza whispered. Her voice trembled, but she forced it strong. Then we don't let them. Calder paused, his gaze meeting hers. You talk like someone born to fight. No, she said softly. I talk like someone who has no choice. His expression shifted just slightly, softening for a heartbeat. The fire begins. The first torch landed against the cabin wall, with a hiss and a flare. Dry timber caught quick, sparks racing up the boards. The heat seeped inside almost at once, a shimmering veil that tightened the air. Eliza choked back a cry, her hand flying to her mouth. Calder grabbed the bucket and doused the flames, steam rising in angry bursts. But another torch came, then another. Soon the whole cabin groaned under the assault, smoke coiling through the rafters. Outside, the sheriff's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Last chance, girl. Send him out and you walk away. Eliza's chest heaved. She turned to Calder, her eyes burning with tears that weren't from smoke alone. They'll kill us both. Calder's jaw tightened. Then better we go fightin' than bowin'. He strode to the door, rifle in hand, but Eliza grabbed his arm. Wait! He froze, his muscles taut as iron beneath her touch. Before you go, tell me, she begged, her voice breaking. Tell me the truth of who you are. Not savage. Not outlaw. You. For a long moment silence stretched between them, thick as the smoke curling around their heads. Then finally he spoke. My name is Calder Blackthorn, he said, the words like an oath pulled from the depths of his chest. I was born to a Lakota mother and a white trader who never claimed me. I learned young that I belonged to no one's world. I took what I had to when my kin were starving. I spilled blood to protect them, but I never killed for pleasure. They call me savage 'cause it's easier than seeing a man. Eliza's heart ached. She reached up, her hand brushing his scarred cheek. Then let me see you, Calder. Whatever happens tonight, know that at least one person saw the man you are. His eyes, dark and fierce, shone with something raw, something unguarded. He bent his forehead to hers just for a heartbeat. And in that fragile moment, the mob outside ceased to exist. The last stand. The door shuddered as the attackers rammed against it. Calder jerked back, rifle ready, his voice sharp. "Stay behind me!" The door splintered. A crack of light and smoke bursting inward. The first man through met Calder's bullet and fell hard, screaming. Another surged in, swinging a knife. But Eliza, heart pounding, snatched a cast-iron skillet from the hearth and swung with all her strength. The blow cracked against his temple and he crumpled. She gasped, staring at her trembling hands. Calder shot her a fierce, fleeting look of respect. "Good," he barked. "Again if you have to." The fight raged, bullets tearing through walls, fire licking closer, smoke blinding. Calder moved like a storm. Every shot precise, every movement honed by survival. Eliza stumbled, coughed, struck when she could, her fear drowned by adrenaline. But the mob was many, and the cabin was dying around them. Flames raced along the beam, smoke choking the air. "We can't hold," she cried, her voice ragged. Calder seized her wrist. "Then we run." He hurled open the back door, the night exploding in a rush of smoke and heat. Together they plunged into the dark. The shouts of the mob behind them. Bullets whistled past. Torches lit the sky, but they ran. Hand in hand, breath burning, hearts pounding. Into the night. They didn't stop until the cabin was aglow on the horizon, collapsing into ash. They stumbled into the ravine beyond town, hidden by rocks and shadow. Eliza fell to her knees, coughing, her body shaking with exhaustion. Calder knelt beside her, his chest heaving, soot streaking his face. "You did it," he rasped. "You stood. You fought." Tears streaked her cheeks. "We lost everything." "No," he said, his voice fierce even through the rasp. "We're still here. That's everything." For a long moment they sat in the dark, the only sound their breathing and the distant howl of coyotes. The world they had known, her fragile hope of a new life, his weary road of survival, was gone. In its place was only this, the bond forged in fire, blood, and defiance. He reached for her hand, rough fingers entwining with hers. She didn't pull away. "Whatever comes next," he said quietly, "we face it together." And for the first time since she had stepped off the coach in Dry Creek, Eliza believed she was no longer alone.